When you hear the words computer security, what comes to mind? For most of us, it's this super complex world of hackers and code, right? But what if I told you the entire field, all of it, really just boils down to answering a few simple, logical questions? In this explainer, we're going to strip away all that jargon and give you a powerful framework to understand it all. No, really, I'm serious. The whole field of computer security, everything from protecting your own laptop to locking down massive corporate networks, it all becomes clear once you focus on just 3 fundamental questions.
And here they are. It's this simple. First, what are we actually trying to protect? What's the valuable stuff? Second, how is that stuff in danger? And third, what's our game plan to keep it safe? It sounds almost too simple, but trust me, this 3-part framework is an incredibly powerful way to think through any security problem.
So, let's actually use that framework as our roadmap. We'll start by figuring out what we need to protect. Then, we'll look at the threats. And finally, we'll dive into the core principles and strategies for building up our defenses. So let's jump right into that first big question.
Okay, so what are we protecting? You know, in the security world, the answer pretty much always comes down to 3 main goals. It's famously known as the CIA Triad. That's confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
First up is confidentiality. The easiest way to think about this is just secrecy. It's the simple promise that your private information stays private. It's about making sure only the right people, the authorized people, get to see it. That's the C in our CIA Triad.
Now here's where it gets interesting, because not all secrets are created equal. The impact of losing that secrecy, that confidentiality, totally depends on what the information is. So for university, if student grades get leaked, oh, that is a high-impact disaster. What about student enrollment info? Still bad, definitely, but maybe a moderate impact. But a public directory of the faculty? The impact of that leaking is basically 0, because it was never supposed to be a secret anyway.
Next up, we have integrity, the I in CIA. This is all about trust and accuracy. It's the guarantee that your data is exactly what you think it is, that it hasn't been messed with or changed or deleted by someone who had no business touching it. It's all about guarding against unauthorized changes.
And wow, this slide really drives home why integrity is so critical. Think about it, if a patient's allergy information is changed, even slightly, that could literally be a life or death situation. That is a high-impact loss of integrity. But someone messing with a user forum? Super annoying, sure, but a moderate impact. And an anonymous online poll getting manipulated? Well, its integrity was kind of questionable from the start, so the impact is low.
And that brings us to our last letter, availability, the A in the CIA Triad. This one is probably the most straightforward. Can you get your information and your systems when you actually need them? It's that simple. It's the promise of reliable access. Because hey, if you can't get to your data, it might as well not even exist, right? The impact of losing availability can be absolutely huge. If the system that lets everyone log in goes down, total crisis. That's a high-impact event. If the main university website is offline for an hour, it's embarrassing for sure, but we'll call it a moderate impact. But if the online phone directory is down, it's a minor annoyance at best. So you see, the context is everything when it comes to risk.
All right, so we've got our what? We're protecting confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now we can move on to our second question, and you can see how this all builds. How are those assets threatened? And that brings us right into the world of threats and attacks.
You know, just about every security incident follows the same basic pattern. It all starts with an asset. Let's say your online bank account. That account might have a vulnerability, a weakness, like a really easy-to-guess password. Then a threat agent, the attacker, exploits that weakness using an attack. Our job, our entire job, is to put a countermeasure in place, something like 2-factor authentication, to break that chain before they succeed.
Generally speaking, attacks fall into one of 2 buckets. You've got passive attacks, which are all about secretly listening in. Think of someone snooping on your coffee shop Wi-Fi. They're really hard to even know are happening because they don't change anything. Active attacks, on the other hand, they are loud. They try to break in and change things or shut systems down. Think ransomware. They are much harder to prevent, so your strategy has to shift towards spotting them fast and responding even faster.
So, now we know what we're protecting, and we know how it's being threatened. This leads us straight to our third and final question. So what can we actually do about it? But before we even talk about tools and software, we need to talk about mindset. We need to look at the fundamental principles of secure design.
Now, there are a lot of design principles out there, but let's just focus on 3 of the absolute pillars that can totally transform security. They are:
fail-safe defaults, least privilege, and open design. If you can get these 3 things right, you've already won half the battle.
Okay, first, fail-safe defaults. This is such a simple but deep idea. By default, nobody gets access to anything. The door is locked for everyone. You have to explicitly grant access. This is so much safer than the opposite, where access is open and you try to list all the people who can't come in. This way, if you make a mistake, the worst thing that happens is someone is denied access, which is a much safer way to fail. Next is the principle of least privilege. This just means you should only give a person or a program the absolute bare minimum permissions they need to do their specific job and absolutely nothing more. Why? Because if that account ever gets compromised, this principle drastically limits the amount of damage an attacker can do. They're stuck in a tiny box instead of having the keys to the whole kingdom.
Now this one might sound a little backward at first. Open design. It means your security method itself shouldn't be a secret. But think about it. A good physical lock isn't secure because nobody knows how it works, right? It's secure because it's built so well that even if you have the blueprints, you still can't pick it without the key. Having many eyes, public scrutiny, actually finds the flaws and helps us build much stronger systems for everybody.
So, with those core principles in our minds, how do we put it all into practice? Well, security isn't a one-and-done setup. It's a living, breathing process. It requires an ongoing strategy.
And that strategy looks like a continuous loop. First, you build your walls. That's prevention. But you have to assume that someday someone will get over the wall. So you set up alarms. That's detection. When an alarm goes off, you need a plan to fight back. That's your response. And after the fight is over, you clean up, you rebuild, and you make your walls even stronger. That's recovery. And then the whole cycle starts over again, but this time, you're even smarter.
So there it is, the whole giant field of computer security, demystified with just 3 questions. What are you protecting? Your confidentiality, integrity, and availability. How is it threatened? Through vulnerabilities and attacks. And what can you do? Design with solid principles and execute a continuous strategy. But it leaves us with one last thought that really gets to the heart of the challenge. The attacker always has the advantage. They only need to find one single way in. The defender, well, they have to find and protect every single possible way. So the real question is, where is your weakest link?